Hi, everyone. Thank you. Thank you very much for showing up. I am so happy to be here again. Nancy Jean,
Mhm.
Nancy Jean from Nancy Jean's Garden. She has a YouTube channel for those who are just now tuning in. And we also have Sean, is that Briscoe?
Yeah.
Yep.
He has been in the political arena for quite a long time. He has tons and tons of experience, same as Nancy. And what we have here is a great, wonderful conversation about how to get involved. And I think this topic here is about activism, something I'm quite interested in. I don't know if I want to join a committee or this, that, and the other, but I'd be more than happy to go and do a protest or something along that lines and have some sort of communication that way. So, what I'm going to do is I'm going to be a backstage. I'm going to give these two full stage today. And in the comment section or in the chat section, if you guys have any questions, please post them. And we're going to have what we call a question and answer session after they are done presenting what they have to present today. And so if you want to have a question, just post it. And when I'm in backstage, I'll write that all down so that we don't disturb their message. So with no further ado, I'm going to hand it over to Nancy. And I am exit stage left. Thanks, guys.
Bye. See you later. Hi, everybody. I'm Nancy Jean, and I'm usually in a garden this time of day, but today I'm not. I'm going to tell you how to cultivate your thoughts. And what we think about and contemplate about, we can bring forward, and that's also true in politics. But how do you get involved in politics? I'm going to take the more other sort of groupie sides. Sean's going to handle more of the partisan politics and party politics and county and your more local political races. I'm going to really proselytize you guys about a group called Indivisible. And it was created immediately after Hillary lost by some congressional staffers who wanted to explain to people something Sean and I've known for a long time. If you want to have an effect on someone, you deal with the politicians that are closest to you. So I can write to Lindsey Graham's office and say that I think Lindsey's sort of a strange person and why is he in the Republican Party? But that's not going to affect anybody because I live in Texas. But I also can write to John Cornyn and Ted Cruz's office. I also can find my local congressional offices and my local politicians and get all their phone numbers and watch for issues that come up and deal with them. And that's what it, and I knew how to do that just because that was the world I lived in. Indivisible created this organizing tool to teach people how to make a difference on an individual level and through a group. And indivisible groups have some really fun names. The closest indivisible group to me is called GOAT, and it's Girls Organizing Against Tyranny. And that pretty much says what they're doing. That's what they're looking to do. They also take on issues. They also deal with local politicians. And so if you can find an indivisible group in your area, they're really going into something very, very, very interesting. Right now, they are teaching classes, Zoom type classes, on how to recognize disinformation and how to work with other people to get them away from disinformation. Because the thing that hurts us the worst if you're trying to run a race is disinformation. I mean, people lying about things, and we're seeing it with the a vaccine for COVID and those sorts of issues. But that if you were interested in at a really grassrootsy level, figuring out what you can do that you can work with your neighbors and work with the people around you to make a difference, indivisible might be a way to go. The other thing that I always tell people is when you're working in politics, the closer you can get to where you are, the lower level in tiered races, the more of a difference it's really going to make on your everyday life. So that means getting to know who's on your city council, getting to know who the mayor or whatever sort of setup you happen to have in your area. Get to know those things. Get to know who those people are, so that you can make a reasonable choice about who you're going to vote for. Right now, QAnon stupidly, I mean, these people are sometimes really stupid. I mean, even stupider than their ideas. They've announced that they're going to try to take over all the school boards. So now you can imagine what liberal people or people who want their children to be able to read, think, and add when they get out of school are going to start doing. They're going to start finding out how to run for school boards. Um, School boards are interesting journeys into the world of politics. Sean's giving you that look. We know about this one, but it's a really important way to affect your community. Um, Other groups that help you that are kind of party neutral are the League of Women Voters. They help organize the voting things. They watch the law. They were signaling early on these states are trying to do some crazy things about voting laws. They can help you get organized if you want to know who's working on that. They're very, and it don't have to be a woman to belong to the Women's League of Voters. There's a lot of guys that are in there too. And they're a really good resource if you want to go back and look and see what's been going on in your area. So also there's a group. Do you want me to talk about Ballotpedia, Sean?
I'll talk about it.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I'm going to let Sean go into Ballotpedia because that's a way where you can research and find out all kinds of information about running for races. So I'm going to let it go to Sean.
All right. Hello, everybody. Yeah, AboutP is actually one of my little go-to sites. They're really good at the state and federal level. And then they do have some information at the city level, depending on how big your city is. But they do a good job. Let's say it's almost a one-stop shop. It'll tell you all of their domains. You can find out where their money's coming from, how, when is their next election, how much did they win by. Kind of gives you a nice little overview of what's going on. And I could not say enough nice things about that website. And I'm always surprised at what they're able to produce. And I know where they're getting their data from, and none of it's convenient. To that end, some counties are better than others when it comes to having the fundamental information you need to, if you really want to start like knocking on doors in your precinct without doing too much work. You should be able to get the voter reg from your county. Sometimes they charge for it. Here in Travis County, you can actually download the whole thing. It comes in all sorts of different formats. I've seen it as PDFs where you have to convert them into Excel spreadsheets, and they do try really hard to make the information, it's available, but the formatting has always been creative. And some of it's very pragmatic, and some of it's just downright unnecessary. And so you got to look out for that. But generally, if you're talking about wanting to get involved and you go to the clubs and you go to the party and you're like, I was wondering, what can I do on my own? I really want to advocate for X, Y, and Z. I like a couple of these candidates, but these are only two that I really like, and I want to walk my precinct. So you just have to have a rudimentary understanding of how Excel spreadsheets work. Get your, you should be able to purchase the voter reg or get the voter reg data for your county or your precinct, or just about any set zip code even sometimes. And once you've got that, then you know everyone who's registered to vote. And usually they come with a voter history. Make sure you ask for that. And that'll just tell you how often they vote and in what primaries. So we don't know who they voted for in that primary, but we do know they showed up to vote in a primary. It's that kind of stuff. So when you go to the Democratic Party and you start hearing them talk about 1D, 2D, 3D, 4D, that tells you how many Democratic primaries they voted in. The party generally only talks to people 2 or 3D or more primary voters. They hardly ever go after the 1D, which is unfortunate because I think that's where the change is going to happen. Like, for example, in the March 3rd, 08 primary in Dallas County, we went back all the way into the 70s in the voter history, and we could only find about 50,000 people who had ever voted in a Democratic primary and were still registered to vote. After that primary, it was over 300,000 individuals. So you can see how it grew exponentially. But then, in 2010, when it rolled around, it was very difficult to convince the parties and the people in charge that maybe going after this enormous brand new universe of all voters that we finally have some kind of data on is a great idea. And the problem is money. Postage is extremely expensive. So, for example, if you've got 1,000 doors that you want to mail to, that's $500 just in postage. You haven't done any ink and paper printing, nothing yet. You've just paid for postage, and that's just a small little drop in the bucket as to what a county party, especially one the size of Dallas, would actually have to produce, or Travis County, or Hidalgo. Any of the big counties here in Texas, it's tens of thousands of dollars just in postage for one piece of mail, only going out to people who voted in 4 primaries or more. So you can imagine when you get down to one primary, you're talking about $80,000-$90,000 just in postage. 100,000 is not uncommon, and so that's where you run into some of the problems. Like, not all state and county parties are created equal. For example, Iowa's state party is extremely well funded, but of course they're the first presidential primary. So
Caucus.
Yeah, caucus. My bad, caucus. And they run and they do they have a show, and it's nationally broadcast every 4 years, and they know it, and they get a lot of funds because you've got all the candidates with all of their war chests, all in the same state, all at the same time. It's just a whole lot of money, and so therefore their party's pretty well funded. Now you get into a different state party, and most state parties, quite honestly, have very little or no funding. If they do, it's from individual donors that are also being plagued by every other campaign. Nowadays, it's almost national. The state party's competing with all the other candidates they're trying to help, and then any other campaigns that are coming into their state to scoop up money and go elsewhere with it. For example, Texas is the largest state to donate to Democratic candidates outside their own state. The first one's California, then it's Texas, then it's New York. The joke was, and Nancy can speak to this because she worked the field back then. They used to call us the Democratic ATM, the DSCC, Democratic Senatorial Campaign Committee, or the DCCC, which is a congressional version of that, would all just fly right in and swipe their little cards and take money out of the state of Texas and away from Democratic candidates. They're fighting for their lives in winnable districts, but they just can't get the money together because all that money already left the state to go play in Pennsylvania and North Carolina or anywhere else that money went. A lot of Midwestern states, and it's just the fact of life. So when you're the cool news is that your state party and your county party have to issue their finance reports. So you're able to actually go in and look at and to see how your county party spends their money. And the things you will find, I can assure you, will blow your mind. And if you're any good with a spreadsheet, you will almost know immediately, if not exactly, what the shenanigans are that are going on in your party, and that might be something you're interested in changing or fixing, or finding out that vendors have been grandfathered in over years, and now they're, whereas maybe 10 years ago they were probably a good deal, but technology changes, and maybe they're not such a great deal anymore. But as with any organization, since that's how they've been doing it, that's how they do it. And you end up having to fight the system a little bit. The other thing I would look out for when dealing with the state and county is a lot of these are entrenched individuals. They've been there 20, 30, 40 years, been a precinct chair, It's almost like nuns and the Pope. They count how many presidents they've been precinct chairs for. Um, and you just, and they're entrenched. And you have to work with them. And some of them are in my favorite, and I use this sarcastically, my favorite group of people, which I call cave people. That's CAVE. Those are citizens against virtually everything. And you'll run into them and you'll know them immediately because they're against virtually everything. They just look for a fight. They're bored. They got nothing else to do. Mm-hmm. And they just love to fight. And they'll fight everything always. And sometimes they'll fight you just because they fought you last time, even though it's a completely different issue. So those are kind of things you just got to look out for. And quite honestly, my advice at the beginning, I would print up a flyer. I would get your voter database for your precinct, and no one can stop you from walking your own precinct. And just start meeting everybody. Go tell the precinct chair you're doing it. That's always really nice. It's just common courtesy. That way, when she gets he gets phone calls, he'll know what the hell's going on. And that's always nice because they're the precinct chair, and technically they're the elected, representative of the Democratic or Republican Party for your precinct. They're an elected official. They don't get paid. There's no real power. They can't tell you to do or not to do anything. But they're definitely they're there to help in most cases. So.
Yeah. If they're in a partisan race, the other thing is you're discouraging these poor people, Sean. These are really things you need to watch out for. So that's why I always say go back to an issue you're interested in. If you like libraries, someone runs the library board in your area, and you can work with people that run the libraries. And some people are saying here that they protested. Yeah, I remember in the 70s and the 80s. And even, unfortunately, in the 60s, I'm that old, I remember protesting companies. I remember boycotts over certain kinds of foods. I remember boycotting grapes because they were organizing the farm workers. I mean, there's different things you can learn about that. So you can very quietly boycott certain things. There's certain major retail places I won't go into, and that's another story of another part of my life, but it's my choice to not support them. You kind of have to start drawing the lines in the sand, and you have to start saying, this is outrageous. I saw a couple of the things saying, how many Republicans are there really? We don't know. I mean, because not every state makes you register through your party. We don't know. How many Democrats are there really? We don't know in lots of places. But one of the things I can tell you can do, and this is why I'm talking about indivisible. Somebody asked, how do you find out who's contributed to someone's campaign? That's in Ballotpedia, which is going to be at the bottom of this. And that's fascinating. I have had to actually go through line by line and see who had given to candidates I was running who were their supporters before. Okay, can you hear me now? Somebody said my volume wasn't good. You can go into Ballotpedia and you can find out all kinds of these subjects. You say, well, why would you want to know that? When we talked about getting the voter registry, if you're just a person sitting at home, you may not need it. But if what you need to get acquainted with is issues and ideas and what you think about things, so that you can start to talk to other people, find like-minded people, and get together and begin to build an idea of where you want to go and what you want to do. That's how activism starts. It's not just going out being against someone, although, trust me, it's much easier to get people to show up for those kinds of things. But it's also when you're for something. Find out if you're for real reform in your police board, find out who does that and who listens to that. And learn about it. And you can find that Ballotpedia has all those things. They'll tell you how your little country, how your government's broken down, and how you can make a difference. There's a woman here who says, I co-founded a caucus, joined committees. Within 5 years, I was chair of my district, was asked to run as a sacrificial lamb for state senate. there are people where they want to run people as issue candidates so they can prove how screwed up people are supporting things. Sean and I've run several issue candidates. He ran one that was running for governor in a primary in Massachusetts once. There's all different sorts of ways you can get involved. But I mean, okay, this is my favorite suit up and show up story. There was a guy who was an attorney, and he walked up to me at a Chablis and cheese party for a city council, for a state house race. And he said, I really want to get involved in politics. What do I need to do? And I said, suit up and show up. Find out who needs help and go help them. And he said, what do you mean? And I said, well, give me your number. And next time I really need help, I'll call you. Well, came to pass within a very short period of time, I had 5,000 Obama signs that had to be made. They were in my house. I needed someone to come staple the little signs to the wooden pegs. I'd gotten a Republican to go in with me to get these signs. She got a little bit of money off it, but we got the signs. Dallas had no signs, and Obama wasn't giving Texas signs. So I called this guy up and I said, we're stapling signs. He showed up at 9:00 at my house, and it was a day when I wasn't feeling well. And he said, don't worry, I'll take care of this. This guy is like a lawyer, right? He stood in my big campaigning room and stapled close to 4,000 signs with this automatic staple. We had to go out twice and get staples for him. That was his beginning, but then he met a lot of other people that were there stapling signs. Then he got more and more involved in Obama Dallas, and now he works at the Brennan Center in New York, and he does legal issues, like he's one of the lawyers that's out there fighting against the vote changing laws. Now, he's still a lawyer. He just didn't like the kind of lawyering he was doing. He loves the kind of lawyering he's doing now, I think. But that's how you do it. You suit up, you show up. And I'm not guaranteeing you're going to get to the Brennan Center. I probably not, but you can make a lot of change and a lot of difference and learn a lot about your area and support other people who are doing things in your area. The thing is, what we learned in 2005 when we had the Obama rally in Lee Park was everybody kept saying, oh, you can't have a big rally in Dallas. There's no Democrats. And I said, yeah, there are, because I ran campaigns that went door to door, and I knew there were Democrats there. We've got Obama, Harry Reid, and Joe Biden. Weirdly enough, that's the threesome that came. And they spoke in a place called Lee Park. We had the largest rally of Democrats. We have over they figure 5,000 was there about. And it was put together with spit and shoestrings. I mean, it was like really, we had
21 days. 21 days from start to finish, 21 days, which is nothing. That's no time.
But what happened was all the Democrats were standing in the park going, oh my God, we didn't know all these Democrats were here. And that was the year in 2006 is when we turned Dallas County blue and made it a blue, got blue judges, blue elected officials in it. And because no one else knew the other one was there, because they were all hiding in their homes, because there was an intense, we sort of had the Fox News of newspapers. It was called the Dallas Morning News. And so don't feel isolated. If you get out and you start finding people who are with you, then you'll not be isolated. And Sheila's in the background. She's hiding. She's taking notes. So what I'd say is go. My top thing right now, if someone wants to learn about being active in your neighborhood, Indivisibles have been going since 2016. So they have a history, but they're not snotty little groups that won't let you in. They are people who want you there. League of Women Voters has always been an open door to whatever your political spectrum is, and they know who does what and what goes where. Okay, Sean, back to you.
Yeah. So I got involved in politics out of college, or actually in college. Also, I was dragged to many rallies as a kid in a stroller. But when I got involved in student government, which is what I did at my university, that opened the door and allowed me to start a network. And then next thing I knew, I was working as staff in legislature and just kind of got plugged in very early. And that's kind of how you do it. You just show up. When we started Obama Dallas, it started at a coffee shop, and there couldn't have been more than 6 of us.
There were
Eventually,
6.
yeah,
6.
6 of us, and by the time we were done, we were thousands. That's not an exaggeration. The weekend before the primary, that Tuesday primary in Texas, that March, that weekend, we knocked on 45,000 doors. Just Saturday and pretty much Saturday, Sunday, 45,000 doors knocked. That's how many the volunteers came in. We gave them their folders. They went out, because this was before there were a lot of apps that you could use on your phone. It was all hard copy, 8.5 by 11 in 3 ring hole binders, all organized and mapped, and the maps that were highlighted so they knew what streets they were going to. They knew what precinct. We tried to keep people in their precincts, and I cannot stress that enough. So, like, just real quick, when you're knocking on doors, anytime you as a volunteer aren't knocking on a door, you're just wasting time, your time, and campaign's money. You want it to be as efficient as possible, so any travel time reduces the efficiency of your field program. Anytime anyone gets lost, that's just the worst. You could lose an hour of knocking on doors. You could have talked to maybe 12 people, maybe 15 people in that hour. So I always try to keep people in their own precincts, because one thing, they're not going to get lost. If anything, they'll be able to walk their precinct more efficiently than anything I can map, because they know their neighborhood. That's part of it. I like keeping people where they are, for one thing, and they'll also know people. They'll just know their neighbors. They'll know the people, oh, I see you at my grocery store, because you all go to the same grocery store. It's stuff like that, and it makes a huge difference. And it makes your involvement more accountable. And I think I'm frozen. Did I freeze?
Yeah, you're frozen.
Oh, no. I don't know how to unfreeze. Anyway, if you can hear me, it's still good. It's like you're actually doing something, because there's a number to it. You have X number of doors that you're going to hit, and things of that nature. So yeah, I got a plan.
Okay.
Am I back? No.
No.
Still not back.
I'll take over. You get up. You
Yeah.
get yourself off and get back on. Okay. Choosing your skills. One of the things I did for the local indivisible groups here in Dallas was I gave them a volunteer sort of recruitment form, and it was like a job application, and it said, I'm available these times, I can do this, so that when a person's trying to work together, a team, and figure out what's going on, they can do it most efficiently. And I think, when I talk to groups, if they start going through a checklist to make sure they're using my time the best way possible, that's really great. You will find out that the most effective people in campaigning is, one, the candidate, when they show up, if the people get to there to hear them. And I really applaud people taking the time to go find candidates, because that's really important. What they do to you face to face and how you feel about them is very different. But the next thing that will impress a person most, we know, there you are, that we know impresses people most, is if a neighbor has either met that candidate or knows about that candidate. And people knew I was involved with politics before I even ran politicians. And people would come to me and they'd say, they'd ask me who they should vote for in races. And I would tend to just give them information, unless one choice was just totally horrendous. But, it was amazing. I lived in a condo community of 200 different units, and more than half the people there told me when I left, who were we going to vote for? Because we don't have you to ask anymore. That meant that by my being educated, I was getting 100, people out to vote. Especially, I did one for a school board race, because a guy was running that I'd worked with in public broadcasting, brilliant man. And he won by 73 votes. 110 of them came out of the condos I lived in. And most of the people told me I would never have known who to vote for. I never vote in school board races. But Sean will tell you about, once you get involved and learn, tell him how we've turned Robin into a weapon from being just a simple hairdresser.
Yeah, so my friend Robin, and she's...
Volume, Sean.
Oh, volume. Sorry. Can you hear me yet?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, Robin is a great example. She's never voted. This was I I registered for the '08 March primary, and she we'd been friends for years at that point, and she was lovely, and she was a hairdresser. She never got involved. Um, she could not wrap her brain. She didn't know who was running. Beyond that, she knew of Obama because he was making kind of a big splash. And she started asking me stuff. I was like, "Were you even registered to vote?" She's like, "I think I was back in high school, but that was in a different county, and I'm not even registered now." I'm like, "All right." So I just went and grabbed some paperwork and handed it to her. She has to fill it out by law in Texas and then mail it herself. I can't be involved in that. But I just said, "Hey, just fill this out." And I walked her over. I said, "Put it in the mail slot." All right. And now you're registered. And then when election day came along, I was like, I grabbed her and we went to early voting. I said, it's pretty self-explanatory, but if you have any questions, the nice little people here running the election that's their job. They will tell you how to press the button. And that woman now votes in everything. She's telling me about elections now that are going on, special elections and stuff. Or, hey, did you hear about this? I'm going to go vote on this on Thursday. And I'm like, I mean, the girl is just 100%. And I mean, and she started in '08. And I guarantee you she's voted in every election that she could have since then. And now it's, over a decade. And I'll tell you, she's exactly the type of person who, if never asked, would never register to vote. Now she actually enjoys it, does the whole thing, gets dressed up, goes have lunch, makes it an event. That's the kind of stuff you got to do. You go with friends. It's more fun. You feel like you did something. And because everyone just sits around and complains. And I mean, if you vote, then you're allowed to complain. Also, man, complaining gets old. So, but yeah, Lou is definitely. I'm sorry, her middle name's Lou. Definitely one of my biggest victories, I think, in politics, because and she's just a gem. But yeah, no, get your friends to register. Ask them if they're registered or not. I can assure you, all of my friends are registered. But always good to ask, and get that in there. And you'd be surprised at some of your friends that they post online. They're obviously aware of what's going on in the news. They would be considered an educated voter if they voted, and they just don't ever get around to it. Or there's a line or blah blah blah. Well, if there's a line, it's way more fun to stand in a line with friends than to be standing alone. And so just take them with you next time you go vote. And a lot of times at the county, especially early voting, and I caveat everything with basically saying that in Texas it's such and such, because everywhere's a little different, and everything's getting a lot more different. So if we don't get the Voting Rights Act passed, but for us in Texas, anywhere in your county, you can just vote anywhere if during early voting, and I think that's still going to be the same, even if they pass this stuff in Texas. So you can go vote with your friends in early voting, and everyone's voting. You're all voting in the same county, so your precinct location doesn't really matter, because a lot of places, they don't have every precinct open on, for early voting. So you can vote anywhere, and it's kind of fun, and it's a good way to also make sure your friends are voting, because a lot of people will say, "Oh, I voted," and then me, being the political nerd I am, I can have the entire voter reg on my phone, and I'll be like, "What's your last name?" Yeah, no. It's like, and so, a lot of times when we're out knocking on doors with a candidate, a lot of, they're always asked, "Hey, we'll be walking by a house," and they'll be like, "Why aren't we knocking on this house? There's someone who lives there." I'm like, they're not in my list. And that means they're not registered to vote, or they don't vote in Democratic primaries. And I'll tell you, 9 times out of 10, that candidate, once the candidate's there, the person at the front yard doing yard work will be, all of a sudden they vote in everything. And I'm sitting there looking at my phone going, no, they don't. Data don't lie. But I find that lots of people on the, as they're doing yard work, talking to candidates tend to. So my advice is stick to the numbers, trust what your spreadsheet tells you, and go forward.
Yeah.
And
find out about registration in your state, because you could be helpful. You can carry the forms and give them to people. One thing that I know most states do have, and I know it's actually the law, and it's not something they're changing right now in ours. Every high school principal in Texas is supposed to be a voter registrar, to be able to register students that turn 18. But what we found out is a whole bunch of them weren't doing it. And so we created a group, got together with the school district and went into, and we eventually had private schools asking us to come in. We'd come in and we'd set up a table a couple times a year and register all the kids that were going to be 18 within 6 months and get them registered. And then there's also the thing about follow-up, because in some of the precincts, they would actually have a follow-up person that would have the kid's phone number, and we remind them, do you have any more questions about voting? What do you want to do? So they knew someone kind of cared if they showed up and voted or not. Finding people who are citizens and should be able to vote. In 2008, our most brilliant find was Ethiopian cab drivers. And they had the same thing happen in New York. They had somebody went in and got all the Dominican cab drivers that were citizens to register to vote, and they became involved. And then they would drive people to all the voting places. We used those guys in 2008. They would go pick up the elderly people that couldn't drive and couldn't get to places, and they would take them in. But it all started from one woman standing outside at Love Field talking to the cab driver and saying, are you registered to vote? And he goes, well, no. And she said, oh, you're not a citizen? And she said, he said, I'm a citizen, but no one's ever told me how to vote. She ended up running a voter registration things, explaining to people at his church. I mean, we got them all in, and I guarantee you those people to this day vote. So that's something you can do kind of no matter where you stand. I think everybody ought to have the right to vote. We're going to need to know and need to be informed about the voter reg laws and how all that works. And I think we're more than a half an hour in, and I've seen some questions go by for Sheila. This is kind of a taste. You have to think about, what do I want to do? Where do I want to go? Where do I want to see my community go? And if you're not part of the solution, this comes back from when I was fighting the war in Vietnam. If you're not part of the solution, you're part of the problem. And we are going into a time where they can give $1 million, but if we can find 1 million voters, Sean and I will tell you that $1 million will get dissipated. Look at what happened to Caitlyn Jenner. Used Brad Pascal and raised a whole lot of money, and now there's no money in that campaign, and Pascal's gone spending Caitlyn Jenner's money. I mean, people have to be sensible about their money and their assets. You need to look at your candidates and see what they're doing, or look at the organization and see what it's doing. But if there she comes, if someone comes to me and says, how do I start? I'd go, what do you love? What are you passionate about? Where do you want to go? Okay, I'm done.
Wonderful. Thank you guys for your stories and for your definite experience on everything that you have. So we do have a few questions. One was, let's see. I thought I had it here. Where is it? Hang on a minute. How do I lose it? I don't understand these things.
I'd like to say my first president I voted for was Clinton, his second term.
Clinton, his second term? I always thought Clinton was a cutie pie. I don't know why. Okay, so the first one is Pat BWI. Is it legal to send letters to your state Supreme Court justices?
Yes, if they're called amicus letters and they're a friend of the court, and you can send them to them. The problem with judges is, and we've run a couple judge races, judges can't tell you what they would do. Like, you can say, I want to build more sewers, or I want to improve the roads, or whatever. They can't say in specific what they would do about a given case, because that's considered being prejudging it. There's some states that have gone away from having judges elected. My home state of Illinois doesn't do it anymore. They get chosen to be on, and then they have some sort of process where they weed them out. I don't really understand how all that works. I know that parties like judges being elected because judges have lots of money around them, and people want to tie into that. I'm not sure because of the restraints around them, I'm not sure how it can help for them to run, but that's one of my tiny races stories. We had a woman who came to us. She had $2,000. She was running for a county-wide race. Now, there were how many? 1.2 million voters at that point in Dallas? Okay. She had $2,000 to spread among them. And we helped her come up. We said, well, where have you lived and where do you have good friends? And we picked 4 precincts, and where she'd grown up and then where she had really good friends. And they worked those 4 precincts so hard that she won her election with more votes than a woman we know paid $75,000 for her campaign, because these were neighbors going out talking to neighbors and saying, vote for her. And she just recently retired from the bench, but she was in every year. She was a good candidate.
All right. So then the next question we have is from Daniel Hess. How does the indivisible handle disinformation from the left and right?
They're talking about identifying disinformation, and from the quick look I took at what it's about, I would say that the skills they're going to give you would work no matter which direction your disinformation is coming from. There is, when you run in a primary, you get disinformation from your own party, the other candidate. They will often say things that are heavily edited to make them look one way. You just have to, as a voter, have to discern that. But I'd say if you just don't take that course or become involved with that for any other thing, then you can hear it. Sean and I will hear a news story, and then we'll hear the story in back of the story. And I think that's what they're trying to teach people to listen for in this disinformation campaign.
So they do really well trying to make sure that everybody is saying the right thing. Is that what they do?
They want you to be informed. If you're a friend of mine's sister started telling her about QAnon theory things, the QAnon wacky conspiracy stuff, and her sister was just appalled and was just like, that's trash, don't say that. Well, then they ended up in a corners, and they're now not talking to each other at all. But when you learn about disinformation, you learn how to subtly get people away from the disinformation, because I can tell you most conspiracy theories are made up of a series of lies that double up back on themselves. They're like that snake that eats his tail.
And what's the purpose of disinformation? What is their angle?
To mentally change us.
They're promoting an agenda.
Uh-huh.
That's what they're doing. They have an agenda. They are paid to get your vote from point A to point B, and whatever they have to do between those 2 locations, they're going to do everything.
They don't care about the collateral damage.
No, they're not paid to care about anything but getting your vote to the box in the way they want it, and that's all they care about. And that's
or to get your non-vote.
Yeah, or get your non-vote.
To discourage you from voting, to make you not see things clearly. And it's a heavy kind of psychological warfare that we've never faced in this country, and it's in large part it's fueled by the fact of social media, which we're sitting on. So what can I say? But the Russians have a whole playbook of how to use lies and disinformation to make people feel insecure about themselves. And if you go back and look at a lot of the things, the fear that they rip up in people, it is that disinformation. The best thing I found to combat fear is to take action. And with their stuff, the only action you can take is to stand in the corner and scream their weird conspiracy theory. Yes, Russia is behind QAnon.
They are. So here's some simple math. Okay, if you're a Democratic primary voter and you've voted a bunch, then your vote is really worth your 1 vote, right? That's your vote. Now, if you don't vote and you're a vote that the Democratic Party's counting on, you're now a -1 vote. You're really a vote for the Republican now, because you're a non-vote that they're counting on. You are pretty much a guaranteed vote. You're not there anymore. That's a vote for the Republican because you don't have anyone to counter their vote. Now, if you get a Republican to vote Democrat, that's worth 2 votes, because it's the vote that the Republicans didn't get and that they were counting on. And then it's a second vote. This is how the math works. The second, you get almost 2 votes as an aggregate because it's not a vote the Democrats were counting on. So when you see large shifts where you're like, where did that come from? Or how did that person get elected? 9 times out of 10, it's a combination, right? You've got all the votes that are guaranteed, those Democratic votes, they all turn out. That's your base. Got to get them out 100%. And then you get all these little independent votes that go either way and they go back and forth. Well, those can also be kind of trussed out and you can figure that out. But if you get Republicans that have never voted before for a Democrat to move over, that's how you win. Because you're cutting the knees out from under your opponent and bullying up your pile of votes on your side. And I honestly think because of the stuff that happened on January 6th, and just because of all the trending data I'm seeing with all these people, they may not be registering as Democrats, but they're unregistering as Republicans, if you know what I mean. I think we're going to see a lot of that go down in 2022. And there's almost no way to target these new pissed off voters. They may just stay home, which is fine. When a Republican doesn't vote and they're a vote the Republicans are counting on, that turns into a Democratic vote, right? Because their vote turns negative.
It changes to margin, yeah.
Somebody was telling me that they were playing games. Like some people were saying that if you're a Democrat, register as a Republican and then vote Democratic. Is that a game that is truly played?
Yeah, we called it in 08 during the primary. A lot of Republicans voted for Hillary in Dallas County. I mean, and I'm not saying that because I was Obama. I'm saying that because you're talking to the only Democrat who voted on the 12 most conservative vote-producing precincts in Texas, and that takes a lot of work. I'm the only Democrat you'll ever meet that's done that, and what happened was we knocked on doors that had a brand new D on it, right? And they also would have some R's, but people change. I can assure you, these people did not change their vote. They voted for Hillary because they didn't want to see a black man get into the Democratic primary and then maybe even into the White House. I mean, it was,
playing games like that's just stupid. If you spent the amount of time you're involved in stupid games and you went out and recruited 3 other people to vote along with you, you'd be better off.
Gotcha. I was just wondering because that's what sometimes they give us that, like, this is how you play the game, and I'm like, is that really a real thing? So
there are people who do it, but I think it's vibrationally, when we're going back into the world Sheila and I normally live in, vibrationally that's dishonest, and it's not going to help your energy, and it's not a good move, and it also can make you sick to your stomach if you think about enough stuff like that.
There are some exceptions, though. For example, so in Texas, the gerrymandering is so bad that 9 times out of 10, the vote's already decided well before even the general election. I mean, the primary is the general election, because whoever wins that Republican primary, because the Republican state house gerrymandered the hell out of the district, whoever wins that primary, it's like a 99% chance going to be the elected official. So I know a lot of Democrats who do vote in the Republican primary in Texas because they're voting for less crazy guy. I mean, it's not like they agree with anyone, but they're almost certain that they don't drink the blood of children. So I guess that's an improvement. I mean, it's
right.
the bar is really low. But you got to vote, make your vote work as hard as it can. Now, in the general, that's the Republican primary. And see, in Texas, you're not registered as anything. You're not Democrat, you're not Republican, you're not independent, you're not green, none of it. Now, candidates register under party affiliations, but voters do not. We're just registered Texans. The only way we know how people vote is by their voting behavior. So these people will go vote in Republican primaries. They're absolutely Democrats, but there's usually not even anyone running in that to vote for.
It's voting in self-defense.
It's really voting in self-defense, exactly. That kind of thing I agree with.
Something just put something in the chat, and it caught my eye. If you vote in a primary and you say, I'm voting in the Republican primary, You do not have to vote for the Republican in the general election. The general election, you just have to pick between. Somebody's just saying that's what the laws say in Alabama. Go to Ballotpedia and read that again, because that's not what it says. I guarantee you, general elections are general. You can pick any name on that ballot and you get to pick one off of it. Okay. Do you have more questions?
Yep, we do. We got a couple of more here. From Shield Maiden, Naughty Woman's Tarot. Is my green card still valid after 25 years of not using it? Does I don't know if it has anything to do with voting?
No.
A green card?
If she's not a citizen, she can't vote. And I don't know what the green card would do for her. I mean, if she's got a green card to work, she's not a U.S. citizen, she can't vote.
Okay, so that's I didn't know if you
her
use a green card to vote.
If you got a green card from 25 years ago and you're still working on it, I'd go talk to a lawyer. That's not anything I know anything about.
Okay. All right. So fundraising in Texas, they want to kind of give us a short version of how that really works.
Oh, which kind? Okay. If you're a candidate and you're running for federal offices, you have federal guidelines that say you can only get so much from each donor. Okay. And they have donating limits. If you're running for the state house, the state senator, governor, any statewide office in Texas, there is no limit to the amount of money someone can give to you. And when I was in one of my first workshops with people coming from out of our state, coming in to work with us, the woman said, now you have to learn the limitations. Now for city council and county and things, they have it. But for the state of Texas, if you're running for a state office, there is no limit. So if you get one filthy rich millionaire who wants your butt in that state house, they can invest as much money as they want to in you. And it's reported. And the other thing that happens is you build up your campaign war chest and you can hold on to it for a long, long, long time. And it used to be that people would do a thing, what we called in the game, cash out. They'd say they were running again and they'd go raise another buttload of money. And then they'd say, oh, I need to go home, be with my family. And you can't get your money back. I mean, it's their money now. Well, now they have restrictions. They have to give it to a school, a library, educational, different kinds of education.
Nonprofit organizations.
Nonprofits or organizations, yeah. But that's what they have to do with that money. So they can't, it's not their personal money.
Okay.
So you know what they do now? What they do now, real quick, is they'll this is, and I'm not naming names, and if anyone asks, I don't know anything. But what happens is they get that money to some nonprofit organization that they go consult for,
and they pull the money off.
Yeah. Yes.
There's no way if they're going to be a scoundrel, they're going to be a scoundrel. But that's why you go and meet candidates so you can maybe spot the scoundrel. That may be a fun new game we do, Sheila. Spot the scoundrel.
I agree. I think I energetically I can go meet them all, and I would energetically pick the one that I would think energetically was good. I can do that from here, but still going and meeting them face to face is definitely.
I shook Richard Nixon's hand.
Oh.
And it was like holding on to a surgical glove full of ice water. Oh, it was horrible. It just, I mean, I literally jumped back. It's when I was in college. Ugh.
Yeah. That would be something.
Yeah.
And somebody else wants to, how do you find out who is fundraising local politicians?
There's actually a couple different ways you can do that. So if you're, let's say you're in a well, you'll have a state government. A good way to figure out where their money's coming from, actually Ballotpedia will tell you where their money's coming from. There's actually a couple different websites, and I'll go find a couple links and I'll get it to Sheila. But there's a ton of information out there now. They've really, especially the federal races, oh man. I can look up individuals and find out everyone they've ever given money to. These are private citizens, but because they're federal races, they have to have full name, employer, and some other stuff. So I can dedupe the John Smiths, if you know what I mean, and figure out exactly which ones are given what. There's a race out here in Central Texas for commissioner. about a third of her money in the Democratic primary came from donors that actively gave to Mitch McConnell. And that was a Democrat. So it's
Wow.
yeah. So what I've noticed, and started noticing a lot, started happening in 2016, 2018, then 2020. The Republicans aren't stupid, or the ones that are in charge are generally not stupid. They can do math. They know that their voter universe is shrinking. They know that gerrymandering is only going to be able to get them a little bit further. And what they're going to end up doing is start throwing their money into Democratic primaries, um, and in the hopes that nobody will find out. But even when they do, usually the candidate that has the most money is the one getting a whole bunch of it from places that, none of the other candidates are. And they just don't have, I mean, if you've been on television for 8 or 9 weeks and you've been using Republican money to do that, and you're in a Democratic primary, what can the other campaigns do? There's nothing. There's no amount of, they're not going to have that money. There's no one to go tell on.
The campaigns can't, but we just had that happen in North Dallas. And we had a guy who had billboards along the highway and everything. He was obviously the business candidate. And we'd already had someone who was obviously the business candidate be our city council person. The woman who won was a neighborhood activist who'd worked her way up through the neighborhoods. She had friends and people in the entire area, and she won. And she won decisively. I think they went home with their butts spanked. But it's you if you find someone and you see that people want to know that where do they get the lists of who gave money. We have to report it. When you're a campaign manager, it's the most fun job you have as a crowd. And it means if someone takes someone and gives them a barbecue, you have to sit there and figure out how much was all that barbecue worth.
Right.
And I mean, but it needs to be done. And that's why dark money, that's what Sheldon Whitehouse in the Senate's going against federal dark money. That's why dark money is so dangerous, because when you have people putting people in, they're literally putting them in their office, and people don't have any idea of who they're voting for. They're
Right.
voting.
Because the money behind them is who's in charge.
That's right. And they
Right.
just say to them, vote the way I tell you to vote, or you can go find another thing. And that's why it's important for people who know they're tied up with someone or they're working with someone who's not in that system. That's why it's so important to help and promote them.
Okay. So our last question, it's kind of a wonky question, but what, in your opinions, because of your experience, what do you diagnose the Republican Party is right now, right here, right now? And then diagnose the Democratic Party right here, right now. In your personal, if you had to go, this is what's going on in their party right here, right now, and you had to teach a class on what's going on and how to explain it and to give the tea about it, you know what I mean? To understand why they're doing this, why they're doing that. But start with the Republican Party.
I think that parts of the Republican Party right now are cooperating on certain bills going through, certain major leaders going through, because they know that aggravating Biden, the DOJ, and all the rest of them, they're playing a game, and they're hoping that if they really help Americans instead of themselves for a bit, that they can make a change and make themselves not look so bad. It's not a bet I'd take. I think I'd still be making sure I had my passports ready. I mean, I'd be heading for the border if I were some of them. The Republican Party really is two parties. There's those that don't lift their head much, and then there's the freaks, and they're the ones that are out there promoting shooting people, and they actively want us to have the disinformation keep being fed into certain people, so that 29% of Americans think they may have to fight for their constitution. And that's not definitely on the Democratic side, although there are Democrats that would go get a gun if they came at them with a gun. I hope they don't think that all Democrats are peace and love.
I was gonna say, just because I'm for peace does not mean I'm unskilled in war.
Yes, that's true. The Democrats are taking some things very slowly. I think they had to get their feet on the ground because I think there's people in Washington who understand better than we do about how awful January 6th was. I understand it intellectually, but I'm not having to figure out how to not fire those people up again. I think they want to get as much of that leadership off the streets and arrested and put into trials and things. And people say, well, why aren't they just out grabbing this guy and grabbing that guy? Because if they do that, first of all, that's what we objected to Trump doing, and it's not a good way to run things. But I think that the Democrats are more aware. I can tell you for a fact that when I heard Ron DeSantis thank Joe Biden for sending him federal help when that building collapsed, I was talking to another reader and I said, didn't you hear the back talk on that? And she said, no, he's still, DeSantis is still a jerk. Well, DeSantis is still a jerk, but somewhere there was a poll that so he'll have those little tidbits to throw into his campaigning that he's cooperating. The other one is all the governors, as soon as their healthcare systems really started falling apart, and the governor of Alabama, is that the woman Ivy, stand there and say, I just can't imagine why these people just aren't taking these shots when they're out doing. She was out there 2 months ago saying, don't take the damn shot.
I know, you think folks would have common sense. I'm like,
yeah, well, not if they elected you governor in the first place. But so what I see is the Democrats are taking things slowly, and people think they're taking things too slowly. And I know there's even Democrats out there that think they want to make them move more quickly, Sean being one of them. But my feeling is that I think we're past that point, unless I listen to Malcolm Nance. I think we're past the point about a lot of the fighting, but I think they were afraid that they really had to figure out how much of them were out there that could rise up and really cause havoc. And so some of the slowness is happening with that. They came up with a perfect solution, and John Cornyn's on it. Sean, did you see the solution on student loans? You can declare bankruptcy and get rid of them. And, they took that out of law years ago, and all 3 of my children are still paying off or trying to pay off student loans, or they walked away and they're just living with the consequences of that. And my kids got good paying jobs and they're going broke. I mean, I can't imagine how other people, have been able to deal with that. So things are happening there that I would not have expected. Especially, I did not expect to see John Cornyn's name on that, which means he knows what's happening in this state. He knows how the votes are shifting. He's going to go for those college-educated people that can't afford to live anywhere but in their parents' basement.
It's the suburbs. That's what it is. That scared the crap out of them. Joe Biden killing it in the suburbs all across the country. The suburbs has literally been the backstop for the GOP, and
the backbone.
And in my lifetime, it's what they've had, and it's what they've operated with. And because the rural votes, of course, theirs, but it's super, super shallow. So, I've seen more votes in a state house district in a city than in an entire county, out there in West Texas, easily. I know exactly where all the votes are in Delta County. Delta County is the shape of a triangle. They weren't even trying when they named that one. But
it has more cows than people.
Oh yeah, by far. But going back to where the Republican Party is right now, there are actually 3 Republican parties. There's the Republican Party my grandparents belong to. They're almost gone now. All that whole generation's almost gone. Then there's we like money. We don't want to pay taxes. We're businessmen. Republican Party. They're the ones that are not registering as Republican anymore. They're the ones that are still going to vote Republican. They're not an independent voter. I don't care what they say. Independent voters are like unicorns. I'll believe one when I see one. And but then there's that third part of the Republican Party. And I'm sorry, they're a bunch of nut jobs. And
that's what I'm seeing is how did they get so whacked? and unacceptable.
They've been here for a long time.
Oh yeah.
I had when in 2004 I was sitting at a booth and I was trying to help this candidate and we were doing outreach, and this guy came up and started yelling at me about Jimmy Carter. I'm like, what are you talking about? You know, there are people, they're like dogs with bones. They're not easy to reprogram, and unfortunately a lot of them all got gathered into buildings that had crosses on top of them.
That's actually one of my favorite stories, is how Texas turned red. Karl Rove, you guys may have heard of him, back in the day, and this was in the mid 70s when hard drives were reel to reel, like the tape. Anyway, they got the entire voter edge of Texas, and then they got all the membership lists for every evangelical church in Texas, and then they merged them, figured out who wasn't registered to vote, registered them to vote Reagan's president. That's how they did it.
Wow.
That's that, and you guys can look that up. It's history. That's what happened, and they basically used the great-great-grandfather of Excel to do it. I think it was called Lotus or something before Lotus. Anyway, it was old school, and it must have taken months of just brutal database work because it was the dark ages of computers. I mean, they were nothing then. But to do that, I mean, I think Karl Rove's a terrible human being, but that doesn't make him dumb. So
right. Oh, absolutely. That was in my line of work. The most dangerous criminal is the intelligent criminal, the smart one.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, the most dangerous, and the ones that we have to truly pay attention to. The dumb ones are the ones who rob a liquor store or whatever, and have lights on the back of their shoes as they're running away, and they can follow the light up shoes. Those are the dumb
Their door.
Well, even Karl Rove wouldn't work with Trump. I mean, the guy does have a level. Also, there was another one of the questions about the Republican Party in states. I've lived in a few different states in this country, and I've lived overseas for a good bit of my life. And I'll tell you, when I lived in Seattle, the Democrats that I was used to working with in Dallas and the Republicans that I saw running for office in Seattle, they're the same. Wow. Policy, platform, everything. But they're not going to get elected in Seattle because they're Republicans. Just like in Dallas County, those Republicans aren't going to get elected in Dallas County because they're Republican. Yeah, I mean,
right.
It's just, but it was weird. It's like, if you watch the commercials, they're talking about universal health care and publicly funded first 2 years of college and paid for preschool and all this other stuff. And I'm sitting there and I'm like, man, this guy sounds awesome. I could vote for this guy. And he's a Republican. I was like, oh, that's how they play that here.
Yeah, never mind, because everything they just said, you're not going to get.
Yeah, exactly. If you literally you vote this Republican, and there's no way that his party
and
will let any of that happen.
And once you vote for someone, don't walk away. I mean, one of the things Indivisible has, and there's several other calling groups, when an issue comes up, they'll get your phone number, say, I'd like to talk to my congressman or senator. They will keep track that you actually made the phone call. Because there used to be a thing where the congressmen and senators would say, oh, well, no one's called me about that issue. But it really needs to be from their constituent group. So if you find Indivisible has things about that too, follow up, call them up, tell them what you think. I mean, I've actually been to Ted Cruz's office. It's creepy, but I've been there.
I bet you it smells bad too.
He wasn't there. He has the world's smallest elevator. It was really weird.
I thought you were going to say something else, Nancy.
No. Have us back and we'll tell you about our friend that ran in the Democratic primary where Cruz was running in the Republican one.
Okay. Yes, absolutely. Well, we're going to make this a thing, especially running up into how many, because we have the 2022 elections, but I mean, that's quite a ways away, but we still need to get prepared and get on board. No,
it's not that far
away.
All.
It's like tomorrow for political consultants and people running
right now. We'd be mapping everything out. We'd be looking at all the numbers,
Oh yeah, no, absolutely.
So here, well, I would love to go over the candidates, like maybe each state, each candidate that is either incumbent or going against a Republican or whatever. I mean, we are a democratic people, so maybe we at some point in time on the run up to it, we start talking about all the candidates and what they offer and what they do, so that we can get that information out, and so that whoever is in that state can then have a voice and get that information out too. It's that's just something that kind of came to my mind at this point.
Yeah.
But
We can, and if certain states, well, once the voting thing goes through in each of the states that's been seriously affected by it, there are going to be ways around that, because we've been getting around that kind of crap forever in Texas. But
and I would love for Nancy and I to throw some tarot cards on that, if maybe.
I don't read
Because she loves me.
because I love you. Yeah. I wish I
Maybe.
could build a grid and make it a portal and suck them all in and make them go away.
Hey, I'll be on that. It has to be one of those great big, huge ones, right?
Right.
I'll draw the black hole in the middle.
Anyway, if Sean's name will be put on your thing, I think, as a person.
I already did that.
Okay, and
Yep.
we sent you Ballotpedia and Indivisible.
It's already on the underneath this video. All of that information is underneath this video already.
Yeah, and just get to know your neighbors, get to know your neighborhood, spread your love out. And if you've gotten like me, I had to quit doing politics when I had to get my knees replaced. And I saw someone who said, I used to work at the polls. This is the single best thing I think that came out of COVID as far as voting. All the people at the polls that were running them were young. I was so used to I was a young one when I was doing it in my 40s. Everybody else was, like coming in with their walkers and stuff. That's a way that you can help, is to make sure that they can't say, oh, but we can't find people to man the polls. And if you want to understand how voting works, work the polls.
Exactly. Yeah, definitely. And this is one of the biggest reasons why we're doing this, is to help ease the fear and the unknowing, to go help and to get involved. Because even me, I can sit in my living room and go, I don't even know where to start. And this is something that we're trying to motivate and promote to where to start and help everybody out. So thanks a lot. I know that we've been on for a little over an hour. Even I am tapped out. So
am I. I built 2 grids this morning. I'm exhausted.
Yeah, so I appreciate that. Thank you for everybody who showed up in the chat and supported this video. I am incredibly grateful for that, and the questions that we did have come through. Next time, maybe I'll be more proactive and post something and see if there's any questions that come out of that. And thank you, Sean, for showing up. I know you're on vacation with your kids, and you took it out of your time to come do that for us. So I really, really appreciate that. So with that, is there anything else you guys have before we head out?
No, just that this fall is going to be incredibly interesting, and a lot of what we're seeing out in front of us is going to be a very changed plane of thinking. And I try to treat everyone, no matter what their political views are, with the grace that I would want them to listen to mine. So that's kind of a thought if you're thinking about this. But do go out, let your curiosity take the better of you. I mean, so you go to, since most meetings you don't even have to go to, you can just go on a Zoom meeting. And I wish I could have organized on Zoom meetings. Trust me, it would have been a lot easier. But
yeah, there's a lot available to us, especially through the internet.
Yes, and I want to thank Sheila for having us on, because this is something I floated to several different readers, and I said, anybody want to do this? And you came back and said, remember we talked about that? And I was like, oh, good.
I'm on it.
I mean,
I love education and learning and all of that.
So. Thank you to Sean for showing up.
Yes. All right, so I have no idea when the next one is going to be. It's like fly by the night, and we kind of organize it just like that. So sorry about that, but you know what? It happens. That's how YouTube is. We show up, we do our thing, and then we go away for a little while. So, all right, everybody, thank you so much. Everybody
Bye.
smile, because this is like the last picture. Smile.